You cut the tomato at the kitchen sink. The juice runs across the cutting board. One bite, and it is good, but it is not the flavor you remember from your grandparents' garden. For years, I blamed nostalgia for that gap, figured childhood had made the old garden taste better than it really did. Then I started finding the old variety names. Some of those crops never disappeared. They simply stopped showing up where families normally buy their food. I'm going to show you 10 heirlooms that can put a name to those old flavors, along with the clues that may tell you what your family grew. And number 8 settles one childhood memory so strange that plenty of gardeners still wonder whether it was real. Number 1. Mortgage Lifter Tomato, the $1 plant that paid off a mortgage. Somewhere in a box marked Mom and Dad's Stuff, there might be an envelope of seeds nobody in the family recognized and threw away. Marshall Cletus Biles fixed radiators for a living in Logan, West Virginia. Everybody just called him Radiator Charlie. In the early 1930s, self-taught, he crossed 4 tomato varieties, a German Johnson, a beefsteak, an Italian, and an English. He kept selecting seed until one giant beefsteak outgrew everything else in the yard. Then he sold the seedlings for $1 apiece. People drove up to 200 miles for that plant. By the time he stopped, he had paid off his $6,000 mortgage. That is where the name comes from. Here is what nobody puts together about that story. The part that saved the tomato happened decades later, when Charlie gave his seed to Southern Exposure Seed Exchange instead of keeping it to himself. That handoff is why you can still order the seed today. Mortgage Lifter is indeterminate, so it climbs and fruits until frost kills it. Figure 85 days to first ripe fruit. Stake it well, because this plant can top 9 feet. Fruit runs 1 to 4 pounds, pink-fleshed, low acid. It grows zones 3 through 9, planted as an annual after your last frost. A viewer wrote to me last year, her father grew Mortgage Lifter every summer, seeds saved in a coffee can on the garage shelf. When passed, the house got cleared out fast, and the can never made it into anyone's box. Nobody noticed until spring, when the bed just sat there, empty. If there is an envelope of seeds in your house that nobody recognizes, do not throw it out. Skip the flimsy tomato ring. 9 feet of vine will flatten it by July. Drive in a real stake before you ever set the plant. The mortgage got paid off in 6 years. The tomato outlived the man who bred it by decades. Number 2. Purple Top White Globe Turnip, Grandma's Sunday supper staple. Turnips get filed under livestock food by most modern gardeners. Grandma filed them under Sunday supper. Purple Top White Globe was the workhorse turnip of the 1800s and early 1900s. It showed up in the D.M. Ferry seed catalog in 1881, already common even then. Purple shoulders, white base, flesh so mild and fine-grained it barely needs seasoning. I used to think turnips were one flavor, harsh. Then I pulled one at 3 inches instead of 6. That is the number that matters here. Pick this root at 3 to 4 inches, and the flavor stays sweet and mild. Let it grow past 6 inches, and it gets sharp fast. 55 days from seed to harvest, planted in spring or late summer for a fall crop. Zone 3 through 9. Picture a Sunday plate. Turnips boiled soft, butter melting into the steam, right next to the chicken. Your great-grandmother pulled this turnip in 1920. Purple shoulders and all. Same short season it still keeps. Number 3. Fish pepper, the secret hiding in Chesapeake cream sauce. This one didn't come from a European settler's garden. It came from a Philadelphia beekeeper's arthritis treatment. Fish pepper started in African-American communities around the Chesapeake Bay, in Baltimore and Philadelphia, in the late 1800s. Crab houses and oyster bars used it to build heat into cream sauces without changing their color. It nearly vanished by the early 1900s. Then in the 1940s, painter Horace Pippin traded seeds for a bee sting arthritis treatment from a beekeeper named H. Ralph Weaver. His grandson, William Woys Weaver, finally published the seed through the Seed Savers Exchange Yearbook in 1995, and that is why this pepper is still around today. Here is the part that explains why it stayed hidden so long. The unripe fruit is cream white, sometimes streaked green, before it shifts to orange, then red. A recessive gene wipes out most of the pigment early, the plant version of albinism. What that means for your kitchen? A diced fish pepper drops into a white cream sauce and disappears. No flecks of red or green show up, just the heat left behind. That is why Chesapeake cooks reached for it, and nobody outside those kitchens ever caught on. Grow it like any other annual pepper. Start seeds indoors, move it out after your last frost, give it sun and warm soil. It fruits in about 80 days from transplant. The plant tops out around 2 feet, small enough for a large pot. Heat runs 5,000 to 30,000 Scoville units, hotter than a jalapeno at the top end. I didn't expect a pepper's color to be the whole secret, but there it was. If your family ever had a secret crab soup or oyster stew nobody could explain the heat in, this might be why. It never became a household name outside the Mid-Atlantic. The story behind it belongs to Baltimore and Philadelphia kitchens, not every family's memory. Nobody remembers the name of the sauce. Everyone remembers it had a kick nothing else in the kitchen could explain. Number 4. Cherokee purple tomato. Too ugly for grocery chains, too good to skip. Put a Cherokee purple next to a grocery store tomato, and one of them looks like a mistake. It's not the heirloom. In 1990, John Green of Sevierville, Tennessee, mailed seeds to tomato breeder Craig LaHoulier with a note saying a neighboring family had grown this tomato nearly 100 years, seed passed down from the Cherokee. LaHoulier named it Cherokee Purple. By 1993, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange cataloged it, one of the first dark tomatoes most gardeners had seen. I put a ripe Cherokee Purple next to a grocery store tomato once, side by side, and the gap wasn't close. Commercial tomatoes get bred for thick skin and a body that survives shipping. Cherokee Purple never got that treatment. The skin stays thin and cracks in hard rain. The shoulders ripen green while the inside turns deep, almost purple-red. That mismatch is why grocery chains passed on it, and why the flavor never got diluted. Grows zones 3 through 10, 80 days to maturity, indeterminate, stake it early. Fruit runs 8 to 16 ounces, dusky purple-pink skin, green shoulders even ripe. Slice one open and the juice runs wine red, with that smell of damp earth after a summer storm. Skip this for the farmer's market 40 minutes away. The skin splits after heavy rain following a dry spell, so it never travels. Only eats well, right where it grew. It looks like it went bad. It tastes like nothing in the produce aisle ever will. But the entry coming up next is the one people wrote to me about for weeks. Real corn their own father grew, decades before it had a name. Number 5. Glass gem corn. No two kernels are ever the same. A farmer in Oklahoma spent decades quietly rebuilding a corn that native tribes thought they'd lost for good. And it started with corn that just showed up in his field. Carl Barnes, part Cherokee, spent years regrowing old tribal corn varieties just to feel closer to his own roots. One season, he noticed volunteer plants in his field carrying traits nobody had seen in generations. Traits that should have vanished when tribes got pushed onto Oklahoma land in the 1800s. He isolated the brightest kernels and kept selecting, season after season, crossing dwarf Pawnee corn with red Osage corn and old Cherokee lines. In 1995, he handed the seed to a friend, Greg Schoen. It didn't go viral until 2012, when it finally got a name, Glass Gem. If I could only grow one corn from this whole list, this would be it. Here's why: the kernels look lit from inside. Color in corn comes from the pericarp and the alurone underneath it. The pericarp comes straight from the mother plant. The alurone carries genetics from both parents, which is why the pollen parent can still show up in the color. As the kernel dries, that outer layer turns almost see-through, and the color underneath shows like stained glass. Every kernel on the cob comes from its own separate pollination, its own private mix of genes. That is why you will never find two that match. Grow it like any other field corn. To save true-to-type seed, keep real distance between it and any other corn, anywhere from a few hundred feet to a full mile depending who you ask, or stagger planting so it tassels weeks apart. If you're not saving seed yourself, skip the worry entirely. Native Seeds Search and Baker Creek both carry it today. A woman wrote into me this past spring. Her father grew something he just called Indian corn back in the 1970s, decades before anyone put the name glass gem on it. She said she didn't notice the resemblance until she saw a photo of glass gem online years later, and it stopped her cold. If your father or grandfather ever grew corn like that with no name attached, this might be exactly that bloodline. It just never got a brand. This is popcorn and grinding corn, not sweet corn. Don't try to boil it fresh off the cob. Every kernel is a different color because every kernel is a different piece of history. If this level of detail on where these seeds actually came from is what you've been looking for, subscribe and hit the bell. Every video gets this level of detail. 5 down, 5 to go, and the one that finally answers whether your memory was ever real is still ahead. Number 6. Jerusalem Artichoke. Tiny tubers were never the plant's fault. If your sunchokes came back the size of marbles, the problem was never the plant. This isn't from Jerusalem, and it isn't an artichoke. It's a wild sunflower native to North America, grown for food by indigenous peoples long before Europeans arrived. The name probably comes from the Italian word for sunflower, girasole. Small tubers usually trace to one habit: skipping the yearly dig, letting the clump sit years until every root fights its neighbor for food. The tubers come back tiny because the clump never gets dug up, not because anything is wrong with the plant. I let mine go too many years once without digging. Should have known better. It stores energy as inulin instead of starch, so give it a longer cook time than a potato, or start small. Zones 3 through 9, cold hardy, 6 to 10 feet tall. Dig up the whole clump every fall. Leave 1 or 2 tubers behind for next year. Give it its own bed or a big container. It spreads on its own. Leave 1 tuber in the ground and it comes back whether you planned on it or not. Number 7. Egyptian walking onion. Plant it once, it walks itself for 20 years. Plant this onion exactly once, and it spends the next 20 years planting itself. An old gardener I know handed me a few starter bulbs one afternoon and told me his clump had been walking his garden for more than 20 years. He said he hadn't bought an onion set since. He just let it spread, dug what he needed, and left the rest to keep going. The name is misleading. This onion has nothing to do with Egypt. Its roots trace closer to the Mediterranean. Grown across a string of ancient civilizations long before anyone called it Egyptian. Instead of flowering, it grows a small cluster of bulbs on top of its stalk. As that cluster gets heavier, the stalk bends down to the ground and the bulbs root themselves right where they land. The plant walks 2 to 3 feet across your yard every year. The forums argue about walking onions being fussy, but they are missing the whole point. Start with 1 small clump. Within a few years, without you replanting a single bulb, that clump has spread itself into a full row. This is a perennial in zones 3 through 9, and some gardeners push it to 10. Cut the green tops for scallions the first season, then leave the mother bulb in the ground through winter. It comes back every spring on its own. The flavor runs hotter than a regular onion. Eaten raw in large amounts. Some people find it too sharp, better cooked, or used in small amounts fresh. One starting clump. And you never buy onion sets again. You plant it once. After that, it's not your job anymore. The next one on this list answers a question I get more than almost any other: whether a memory from 40 years ago was even real. Number 8. Moon and Stars watermelon. Proof your yellow watermelon memory was real. If you've spent 40 years wondering whether you actually ate a yellow watermelon as a kid or just dreamed it, here's your answer. Moon and Stars first showed up in 1926, sold by the Peter Henderson Company under the name Sun, Moon, and Stars, dark green skin scattered with small yellow flecks. It vanished from every catalog and was considered gone for good until the early 1980s, when Kent Wheely, co-founder of Seed Savers Exchange, tracked down a Missouri farmer named Merle Van Doren, who had quietly kept growing it on his own land in Macon for decades without telling a soul it mattered. Nobody was watching. In 1987, Seed Savers Exchange brought it back, both the red-fleshed line and the yellow-fleshed one. Southern Exposure still carries the yellow-fleshed line. I used to think a yellow watermelon from my own childhood was something I'd mixed up with a story someone told me, until I found the actual seed listing. The real issue was never your memory. It was the watermelon seed industry, which nearly erased yellow-fleshed varieties off grocery shelves because red sells faster, not because yellow is some rare genetic fluke. This grows 90 to 100 days to maturity, full sun, soil above 65 degrees when you sow it. It runs from Zone 4 down through the Deep South, depending on how long your season stretches. Fruit weighs 10 to 30 pounds. Look for small yellow flecks, the stars, plus 1 or 2 bigger blotches, the moon, scattered across dark green skin. Even the leaves carry yellow speckles. This is open-pollinated, so keep it away from other watermelons if you want to save true seed next year. Buying fresh seed each spring sidesteps the problem entirely. You didn't imagine it. You just grew up right before it nearly disappeared. Number 9. Turkey red wheat. The seed smuggled in a trunk that built Kansas. This is the seed that built the phrase, "Kansas, the breadbasket of America," and it crossed an ocean in a trunk to get there. In 1873 and 1874, German Mennonite families migrating out of Ukraine and Russia carried turkey red wheat seed with them into Kansas. It was the first hard red winter wheat able to survive a brutal Great Plains winter, and it reshaped farming across the region. For nearly 70 years, it dominated, right through the 1940s. Then, it nearly disappeared. An organic farmer named Bryce Stevens spent the last 20 years bringing it back. You do not need a field to try turkey red. A 4x8-foot bed gives you enough grain to grind a few batches of flour. You get the flavor without owning a combine. Turkey red is sown in fall, harvested the following summer, like any winter wheat. It needs real winter cold to do its job, so match it to your local winter wheat conditions before you plant. Bake a loaf from it and set it next to a bag of store-bought white. I would grow a small patch just for that smell alone. This is a field crop, not a backyard vegetable. A small patch gets you an experience, not a year's worth of bread from a few square feet. One state's whole identity started with seeds hidden in a trunk. Yours can start with a coffee can of them. One more after this, and it's the one with the tool story stranger than anything else on this list. Number 10. Hubbard squash, the shell so tough it needed its own tool. Cut into a Hubbard squash and a regular kitchen knife suddenly feels too small for the job. That tough shell is exactly why Hubbard stores so well. Elizabeth Hubbard did laundry for a living in Marblehead, Massachusetts. She handed the seed for this squash to the family she worked for. And in 1842, a seed merchant named James J.H. Gregory got hold of it, commercialized it, and put her name on the label. The skin runs thick and bumpy, tough enough that it feels like a flaw the first time you try to cut into one. It isn't. That shell is preservation technology from before anyone owned a refrigerator, holding a squash edible for 6 months in a cool cellar. This one just sits in the cellar looking indestructible. Set it next to a butternut hybrid and the comparison tells the story. Butternut skin is thin, easy to slice, gone in a couple of weeks. Hubbard's skin is thick as a turtle shell, and that trade buys you half a year of storage with no fridge involved. Exactly the technology families leaned on to eat vegetables all winter before 1950. The shell is doing all the work. Hubbard squash grows zones 3 through 10, like most winter squash, planted after your last frost clears. Vines run 10 to 15 feet, so give it real room. Expect 100 to 120 days to maturity. Fruit weighing 12 to 20 pounds. Press a fingernail into the rind. If it doesn't leave a mark, it's ready. The tool got passed down along with the seed. Same knife, same table, every October. This vine needs 10 to 15 feet of open ground, not a raised bed or a pot. Give it room or skip it. The vegetable didn't need a fridge. It needed a good knife and a family that knew how to use it. 10 varieties, 10 flavors supermarket hybrids gave up decades ago for the sake of a truck ride. They're still real. They're sitting in seed catalogs right now, waiting for someone to plant them again. One habit would have saved thousands of families their grandparents' seeds. Every fall, drop your saved seeds in a plain envelope, write the variety name and the year on the outside in pen, and tuck it into a jar in the coldest, driest spot in the house, not the garage, not the shed. That's the difference between a seed collection your grandkids can actually use and a mystery bag someone throws out during an estate sale. Tonight, before you turn off the kitchen light, grab a pad of paper and write down 2 or 3 things your grandparents or parents grew that you can still taste when you close your eyes. Tomorrow, pull this list back up and match those flavors against the 10 names here. Then place 1 seed order this week, before the memory fades again. Your grandparents' garden isn't a memory anymore, it's a seed packet away.